This is a video about a rhetorical analysis of an image. So as you know, the assignment for your first essay is to write a rhetorical analysis, not of a text or of a speech, but of an image. I think analyzing visual rhetoric is a great way to begin. Most of us are bombarded with some form of visual rhetoric every day, every time we open up Instagram or look at an advertisement. And many of you are probably creators of visual rhetoric. If you're somebody who posts frequently or contributes to social media, you're probably a creator of visual rhetoric. One of the goals is to unpack how the ad is working. And I say ad, but it could be an image. It does not necessarily have to be advertising a product. It could be the cover of a magazine in the example that I'm going to show you in just a moment. So the goal is to unpack how the image is working, to look at all of the parts, to take the image apart, and then try to figure out if it's conveying its message effectively. So this essay is going beyond just summarizing what the image's message is. It's actually analyzing what the message is and making an argument about how effectively the rhetorician, the person or the chatbot, whatever it is, who created the image, how effectively the rhetorician does that. And there's a separate video on thesis statements for rhetorical analyses of an image that you can take a look at a little bit later in the week. I'd like you to find for this assignment an image that's cutting edge and contemporary, ideally something that has popped into your feed or that you've seen on the cover of a magazine, wherever, something that you've seen within the last year or so. The more contemporary, the more cutting edge, the more tailored to you, the better. So ideally, I would get a little snapshot into who you are or who various companies think you are based on the image that you select, right? Maybe it's something that keeps following you around social media or a magazine or a flyer that arrives to your house, something like that. Let's pretend that we're analyzing the cover of New York Magazine. This came out last year in December of 2022. Let's pretend that we're analyzing this image. I'm just doing this as an example. Some of you might be familiar with the image. I think it's a really funny image and also compelling and a bit more nuanced than it might seem. So how would we go about doing this? Well, once we've selected our image, whatever image you're choosing, we'd want to spend probably 20 minutes just making observations. You could make a list of observations, you could make a cluster diagram, you could do some free writing, just noticing what you see. A list of observations. When you first look at this image, you might think, oh, okay, so there's a bunch of actors, some of whom might look familiar or vaguely familiar, or maybe they look extremely familiar to you because some of them are pretty big stars. They seem to be posed as babies in their hospital bassinets. They have the bobblehead effect. They're wearing all the trappings of babyhood, right? They have rattles, they have onesies, they have cute dimpled thighs, and they look a little bit ridiculous, I'd say, because their heads are obviously adult and their bodies are tiny. I'm also noticing the text, the color of the text, the placement of the text, the fact that one of the sentences begins with and. It begins with the coordinating conjunction. And even the subtitle right here, extremely overanalyzing Hollywood's Nepo baby boom. That language there is very informal, very conversational. You would have to know what a Nepo baby is, although most of us can probably figure it out. Nepotism baby, I think, is the idea there. So I'm just taking notes on the ad, or not the ad, excuse me, on the image, noticing little details that might not add up to anything, but probably do. Probably the people who created this image knew what they were doing and were trying to convey a certain message. So when you are writing your essay, you want to take a lot of notes on the image, and then before you actually create your formal alphanumeric outline that uses Roman numerals and letters, that's the next step, generate some sort of pre-writing document, like I said. List, cluster, whatever it is that you feel comfortable with to brainstorm ideas. And you might want to think about how you're going to organize your paragraphs, how you're going to group up ideas. A lot of times for this essay, students have a hard time coming up with a controlling idea or a topic sentence for each body paragraph. you really have to have a plan for this essay. Once you've gone through the note-taking stage, you want to have an idea. Okay, in my first body paragraph, I'm going to talk about this sub-point, right? A point that's smaller than your thesis. It still makes an argument, but it's a sub-point or a smaller component of your thesis. There's not a formula for how to do this, right? This is an essay that doesn't have to be a 5-paragraph essay. You might have 4 body paragraphs. You might have 3 body paragraphs. You might even have more than that. So the format in that way is up to you. How many body paragraphs you have is going to be up to you. So one way, if I were writing an essay about this ad, I might include a short paragraph about the context somewhere. Or maybe I want to include that in the introduction. When did this come out? Who's the publisher? Why did this go viral? Why did it spawn so many spin-offs? What's going on in our culture? What's the rhetorical situation? Why is it that this really struck a chord with people and ended up going viral? That shouldn't be the focus of the entire essay. Our focus is analyzing the image in front of us, right? Whatever image you choose. But you may have to talk a little bit about the context. And you might think of this idea of kairos that we mentioned a couple of days ago. Maybe I want to have a paragraph in which I talk just about the baby images and what the rhetorician, the creator of this image, is doing there. Are we trying to get is it giving the sense that these actors are kind of ridiculous or absurd? Is it sort of infantilizing them? It's obviously infantilizing them, but to what effect? In what way? Is it suggesting that this is sort of a funny and cute thing and it's not really threatening that they're Nepo babies? So I might have a paragraph just talking about all the trappings of babyhood that I see in this image. I might even have a paragraph talking just about the text, especially the text that's in the larger font here. This might be an interesting place to talk about those rhetorical appeals that we've been discussing. So even though at first glance this advertisement might not seem to be appealing to logic, I do think there's an argument being made, a logical argument being made, maybe with some components that are missing in this sentence or these 2 sentences right here. She has her mother's eyes and agent. So what are some of the implications of that? What's the argument there? I wouldn't say it's exactly a syllogism, but maybe you'd want to talk about enthymeme here, some sort of premise that's left out or a little bit fuzzy, but that the rhetorician assumes that we will fill in. When I'm looking at this, I'm also thinking of subtext, maybe what's lurking beneath the surface here. The assumption that these people kind of had an easier go of it, or perhaps that they wouldn't be famous or successful at all if they didn't have their parents' physical features and, of course, their connections or their agent. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of the logical argument here too. You might even talk about tone. Oh, look, it's infantilizing them, making them seem kind of cute and non-threatening. Or is it supposed to be kind of a slam or an insult or a little bit of both or something altogether different? You might talk about audience. So to understand this cover or to be pulled in by the cover, who do you have to be? Who do you think the intended audience is? And that might depend upon which figures you recognize. They all look relatively young to me. I recognize maybe 4 or 5 of them, but there are a few that I had to Google that I didn't recognize at first. What are they suggesting, or who's the intended audience when you feature these celebrities or these stars or actors? So you might have a paragraph talking a little bit about audience. Some students will try to divide their essay according to the 3 Aristotelian appeals. You can do that, but it tends to be very formulaic. If you're trying to have 1 paragraph for each appeal, then you're kind of locked into the 5-paragraph essay, intro, 3 body paragraphs, conclusion. So don't feel like you have to divide your essay according to the rhetorical appeals. Maybe you mention rhetorical appeals within 1 paragraph or just kind of throughout your essay. You do need to have a plan though. How are you going to organize each body paragraph to be cohesive, to be its own paragraph, but to also connect back to your overall argument, which is not whether or not you like the image. It's not whether or not the image is fun. It's how effective is the image? How effectively does the rhetorician convey the message, not just what the message is? Remember, if you're choosing an advertisement, I don't want an essay in which you endorse the product or say this is a great product or a terrible product. You're analyzing the image itself. That's really the focus of the essay, not so much the product or the idea being sold or being examined, but the image itself. And this is so important because if we have the tools to do this, we can resist. We can have a paddle in a boat when we're going down the current and not just be taken in one direction. We can actually use these tools as if they're a paddle or a boat to swim upstream or to change course or to not be influenced by everyone around us, unless we want to be, of course. So these are tools that we can use, whether we're analyzing an image or a text or a speech, whatever it is. These are tools that we can use to steer against the current when we want to, or to at least to recognize that there is a current that's pushing us in a certain direction and decide which way we want to go. So I think it's a really important skill, not just for this assignment, not just for this class, but for people who live in an age of social media. I think it's really important. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. I can't wait to see what advertisement or image you choose. I think it reveals a lot about kind of what interests you. I want you to choose an ad that or image that appeals to you, that you think is really intriguing or disturbing or problematic or funny. Don't just Google and find the most obvious image that pops up. Really try to choose one that appeals to you, that relates to you in some way, ideally one that is popped up in your feed in the last couple of days.